Thank you so much for those oversights on eczema. We have some questions. So question number 1 is, I've recently started a school research project looking at atopic dermatitis and different treatments that are used. Having had this condition myself from childhood, I have used steroid treatments and am aware of the possible side effects and the difficulty in trying to manage flare-ups. My project focuses on comparing calcium, I have trouble with that word, calcineurin inhibitors to traditional steroid treatments. Are you able to provide any insight on that? Thank you.
Interesting project. It's really important the body of literature has published on this topic already, because there may be some studies that have actually looked at this exact topic, but it's always well worth to have some local studies. I generally say in terms of how effective calcineurin inhibitors compared to topical steroids is that they would be more similar to the weak to moderate potency in terms of topical steroids. Deshaun, what are your take on that?
Yeah, totally agree. With steroids, there's a big spectrum, right? So we have ones that are super duper weak, over the counter, you can get them, without a script, and then there's stuff that is potent, and then you need a script for it, and then there's stuff which is super potent where you need to get a special script because it's not available in tubes. That's a very broad church when it comes to steroids. In Australia, with the calcineurin inhibitors, we've pretty much got 2. So there's one which you can just get with a script, and then there's another one where you have to get it made of a special lead. Both of them, I would say, weak, maybe towards moderate.
Oh, great answers, thank you. And I'm so glad someone can pronounce that word. Next question is, I've been told from our doctors, allergists and dermatologists that eczema is a symptom and not a diagnosis. Is this accurate?
So eczema is a diagnosis, and it comes from inside, so it's an immunological problem that manifests in the skin, just like asthma is an immune problem that manifests in the airways, or inflammatory bowel disease or Crohn's disease is the same thing with the gut. But eczema is definitely a diagnosis.
Yeah, you're right, Deshaun. I think eczema and dermatitis can be used synonymously, and you'll find that there's often a word in front of eczema or dermatitis. For example, there are various forms of dermatitis that could be related to atopic disease, otherwise known as atopic dermatitis, but there could be external causes for a dermatitis. For example, contact dermatitis. So that's and that contact dermatitis could be through irritation. So for example, if you wash your hands enough, everyone will get irritant contact dermatitis from just the exposure of your hands to water and hand sanitizers for that fact of late, which is an increasing problem. And then of course you can become sensitized to external allergens, and in that setting that's called allergic contact dermatitis. So that's probably where the confusion arises in terms of if eczema is a diagnosis. Indeed, it is a diagnosis. It has its own disease classification. So certainly we recognize it as a condition and disease.
Next question. My son's eczema is rarely itchy, only when the skin peeled and there's a new skin. So is it eczema?
So eczema does present with scaly skin, and as we all know, the way that skin, the building blocks of skin starts from the bottom layer and it works its way through the top. So if eczema, as a result of eczema, you have broken skin, yes, your eczema will naturally, your skin will naturally renew and you will have new skin come up underneath. But that's the nature of eczema. It results in broken skin, the immune system gets involved, and it's an ongoing cycle.
Why does eczema spread? And also, are there any studies on childhood vaccines being kickstarters to people developing eczema?
Well, we know that there are parts of the immune system that cause eczema, and there are these resident memory T cells. So these are special immune cells that live exclusively in the skin for all of their lives, and they don't actually go back into the bloodstream. And often these immune cells are often very trigger happy and primed to react to the outside world. And that's what Dr. Sebaratnam was talking about, how in the context of food allergies and using creams that contain foods, that could inappropriately sensitize these immune cells to being exposed to things that they're not normally meant to be in contact with. And that's what causes the flare-ups of eczema. So you can even have normal skin, but that normal skin can be poised to actually react under the right circumstances.
Yeah, one of the things a pediatric consultant once told me was eczema is a bit like money. If you don't have any money, it's hard to make any money at all. Once you've got a little bit of money, it's easy to make more money. And that's a bit like eczema. So once you have a little bit of eczema, it's easy for it to spread and it's easy to get more of it. But someone who's never had eczema in their whole life, they're less likely to get eczema. So no one knows. I mean, it was probably going to spread anyway. It's not like an infection where if you treat it aggressively, you're going to stop it from spreading. As we alluded to before, it's not a problem normally with atopic dermatitis, the skin per se, it's the immune system. The immune system goes everywhere. So there might be certain topographic things like how thick the skin is, or exposure just to the outside environment. But you can't really spread eczema per se. If it was going to spread, it was going to spread. And then with the second part, anything that ramps up your immune system is going to flare up your eczema. So again, I don't think the vaccination necessarily caused the eczema, but if you do anything to ramp up the body's immune system, and that can be getting sick as well, the eczemas can flare up.
Okay, thank you so much for those answers. Quite a complex question. We have a really long question here, which has a bit of background about someone who migrated to Australia from the UK. Their actual question is, do you know if the government were involved in any decisions by health funds, or how we as a community can encourage the government to reconsider a decision on the link between food consumption and the skin? And actually, Dr. Fu, you did sort of answer this earlier a little bit, but maybe just talk about this a little bit more, because this is one thing we get asked on a daily basis. Well, the second thing actually, the first thing is using topical steroids, and the second thing is diet. So maybe if we have a little bit more of a talk about diet.
So I'll start answering that question, but in the interest of time, we'll see if we can answer it as succinctly as we can. So the role of diet in eczema is certainly not a new topic. It certainly evokes a lot of investigation. Whether the government is actually specifically involved in funding education or advice or consultation with, for example, dietitians, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if that is currently funded for eczema, but certainly that would be an interesting to pursue. But it always has to be evidence-based. With a lot of these, there are limited funds with relation to government funding, and hence looking at other healthcare providers providing advice, or whether it's dietary advice or whatever, there needs to be a body of evidence behind that. And at the moment, I don't think that the evidence is enough.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. So I mean, with all of these things in government subsidies, the government's only going to support things which have some kind of basis, or I guess are common as well. So our current understanding is that the majority of people's diet doesn't play that much of a contributory role. I guess that, as I mentioned, there are some people where it does, but I guess with anything, you have to make submissions to the government in terms of why it's worthwhile supporting it. And if there's not that many patients who are affected by a particular condition, often these things don't necessarily get the spotlight that they need. So with diabetes, for example, we know that there's a definite connection between what you eat and blood sugar control. With eczema, to be evident so far in the